Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I was 32 when I learned how loud silence can be inside a shipping bay. You wouldn't think a port could ever be quiet. The Port of Shanghai is a city made of steel and tide, a place where the air trembles with diesel, horns, and hydraulics. But when the alarm lights went from amber to red across berth 18 at Yangshan Deep-Water Port, and the security gates rolled down like armored shutters, and the ZPMC cranes froze with their spreaders suspended over the yard, the noise folded in on itself. I heard my own breath inside my Kirby Morgan helmet even though I wasn't in the water, just out of habit, checking the seal with my thumb. "Copy, surface test good," I said into the mic anyway, and my tender, Jiro, a Filipino rigger on loan to our team, laughed in my ear. "Broad, you're on concrete. Save your oxygen for later." Our salvage team worked out of a rented maintenance bay painted government gray, with a yellow line taped along the floor we were told not to cross. We were a mixed crew, like every commercial outfit that chases contracts up and down the Pacific Rim. I'm Mateo Teo Lorente, commercial diver from Batangas, trained in Subic in Singapore. Team lead was a Hong Kong-born supervisor named Alan Chan, a former Navy engineer with the calm voice of a man who trusts checklists. Our Chinese counterparts from the terminal were led by a foreman named Liu Wei, who had a permanent squint that could pass for a smile or suspicion, depending on how much paperwork he was holding. Our crane operator on night shifts was a Russian named Yasha, who swore you could balance a 40-foot high cube on a teacup if the wind behaved. The medic was a Malaysian named Farah. The safety officer, an Indian surveyor named Bhaskar. We all had English, and between us, enough Mandarin and hand signals to keep metal moving in the right direction. We were brought in to deal with a piece of bad luck. A stack collapse on the outer row of Yard E 2 nights prior, after a squall dragged an anchor line across a container barge. One 40-footer listed, another slid, and then gravity did what it always does. One unit pierced the angle bracket of a reefer and made a mess of chilled cargo that I will not describe here. Only that it made the whole block smell like a pantry left in summer. A second unit slid to the edge of the quay and then vanished between the quay wall and the barge's fender. That was our primary. An underwater search and rigging job with surface-applied divers and lift bags. Routine in theory, miserable in practice. The water in Hangzhou Bay is silt brown and impatient, and the tide keeps a schedule stricter than airport staffing. We spent the morning prepping. Hard hats, reflective vests, gloves, the usual dance between yard trucks and reach stackers, staying inside painted lanes while everyone else pretends the paint is optional. I walked our dive umbilicals, checked comms, tested the bailout bottles. Pressure in the green, harness buckles tight, helmet ring seated. The equipment is simple if you respect it. A commercial diver carries a small planet's worth of life support on one line. Breathing gas hose, comms wire, pneumo line, sometimes a hot water hose with a backpack heater if the water is mean. The only romance in it is survival. Before noon, Port Authority sent 2 officers down the lane in a white electric cart. Their uniforms were fresh in that way that says, "New directive, new risk." One officer did introductions. Officer Zhang, with clipped consonants. His partner, Officer Wang, eyes on a tablet. They asked for Alan and Lou, and the 4 of them stood in a square that made Jiro tug my sleeve. "Teo, they're arguing but smiling. That's not good." I could only hear every 4th word. Quarantine, manifest inspection. Liu kept repeating transfer hold, pointing at a printed page, the way you do when you think pointing makes text heavier. Alan didn't raise his voice. He never does. He asked to see the bill of lading that triggered the visit. The officers didn't show it. They asked instead if our team could assist with opening a sealed unit from a flagged origin. Not our scope of work, but we sometimes do first open assistance when a container's door looks compromised. It's safer to have riggers and rescue gear on hand when something springs. "What's the origin?" Alan asked. Officer Zhang didn't answer at first. He changed the subject. It took a long breath for him to say it. "Quarantine zone, transshipment through Busan, last known point of loading in Dalian." He named a vessel, a Panamax container ship that had sat at anchor for 2 days, while authorities argued about documents none of us would ever see. There had been rumors for weeks, not just here, but at other ports, about incidents. People found in units that should have been closed, strange results on thermal scanners. You hear things on VHF you aren't supposed to hear. Most of it is noise. "How long has it been sealed?" Alan asked. 72 hours since last confirmed inspection scan, Officer Wang said, scrolling. He read off the ISO 6346 code of the unit, the owner's prefix, the serial number, the check digit, 4 letters, 7 numbers, the global language of boxes. A 20-foot dry, 20 standard, not a reefer, not a tank. The destination was listed as inland China by rail. The customs flag was a red square in the app. Our job would be to cut the bolt seal and open the right-hand door, while everyone with a badge stood back enough to give us room and authority. Liu didn't like it. "This is not our agreement," he said in Mandarin, which Jiro could follow better than me. "We hired them for underwater. If you want emergency, you call your own emergency." Officer Zhang remained pleasant. He pointed at the sky and the schedule board and the line of trucks waiting beyond the gate. "If Yard E1 remains closed, your throughput metrics decline. We help each other." Alan gave us the look that means, do the prep as if we're going to do it, while I keep the paperwork moving. So we brought the spreader bar for controlled door opening, a portable air sampler, face shields, a set of bolt cutters, a battery floodlight, and the emergency board. Backboard, straps, oxygen bottle. Farah checked the med kit twice. "Standard, first open," she said. And then, with a softness she saved for after-hours chess, "Don't be a hero." The container that caused all the diplomacy was parked at the far end of the bay, where the roof hung lower, and the echo made every footstep sound like a train. The unit was brown, with a metallic flake someone thought was stylish. The right door's gasket had a fresh rub, like something inside had pressed and let go. The high-security bolt seal was intact, but there were scratches around the hasp, something as simple as a tool scraping, or as complicated as a story we did not want to read. Alan did the call-and-response safety briefing next to the door. He pointed to me and to Victor, a second diver, Ukrainian by passport, raised in Odessa with forearms like Doc Bollard's. He wasn't much for talking until he warmed up, then he had jokes for 3 languages. We would be the 2 on the door. Jiro would tend, Bhaskar would manage samples and air meter, Farah and Lou would stand ready with the board, and the officers would observe from a mark Alan taped 20 paces away. A camera, a small body cam issued days earlier, was clipped to my chest. I forgot about it as soon as I clicked it on. "Standard open," Alan said. "We assume nothing. If anything looks wrong, we close and back away." "Define wrong," Victor asked, almost smiling. "Anything you have to ask that question about," Alan replied. That was Alan. Instructions without theater. I set the spreader bar, clipped the door rods to a sling, nudged the locking cam. The air smelled like rubber and salt, and further back, the sweet burn of welders working on a reach stacker. I don't tell myself I'm calm, I count. 1, bolt cutter in. 2, cut clean. 3. Set the broken seal on the floor for the log photo. 4. Cams turned. 5. Jiro's back foot pressing on the brake of the capstan. 6. Bhaskar nodding at the air sampler. Reading stable, oxygen normal. 7. Alan's voice in my ear over the local channel. You are green, Teo. Open 12 centimeters. The door made that sound doors make when they have never been respected. A gives-way whisper in the gasket, a click in the rod, and then the hinge took the weight. We pulled slow until the right-hand door was open the width of a hand. Air slipped out. It was cold inside, colder than the bay by a touch. That happens sometimes. Cargo can hold a night's worth of ocean and release it on your skin. The smell was wrong. Not sharp, not chemical, not the earthy mold of spoiled goods. It was like a room where someone had worked too hard for too long and forgot to open the window. Stale breath, maybe. We waited for the meter to tell us something it didn't. Oxygen a shade lower, still safe. No carbon monoxide spike, no chlorine, no ammonia. Bhaskar gave me a small shrug that said, the instruments don't know everything. 12 centimeters to 20, Alan said. No further until we confirm. We drew the doors another hand's width. The floodlight cut through dust and landed on a pallet that had migrated. Brown cardboard smashed in the corner, the letters of a brand I won't print here. The front edge of the pallet had streaks like something dragged over it, dark, not bright, not fresh. On the inside face of the other door, just visible through the gap, were small half-moon indentations at erratic heights. It took me a second to place why they looked familiar, and then I chose not to. Alan, I said, keeping my voice neutral. There are marks on the inside of the left door, irregular. They look organic. He didn't answer that directly. Any movement? Any sound? We all listened. Steel groaned somewhere overhead where the wind worked the roof. A seagull scolded no one. A forklift coughed to a stop against a concrete column. Inside the container, nothing. Just the kind of silence that suggested a living room after a whisper. Okay, Alan said. 20 to 40. We commit to the doorkeeper at 40. Farah, board ready. Officers, please remain at the line. I nodded at Victor, and we drew the door open until its own hinge weight took the slack. I swung the floodlight beam to the center aisle and froze it there. The container was loaded sloppy, 2 pallets strapped forward with webbing, and then a gap someone had filled with loose cartons to hit a weight target. The floor was dimpled plywood. The air looked like cold glass. In the back, shadows that didn't decide what they were yet. Then a face appeared in the beam. He was sitting with his back against the rear panel, head tipped to one side like someone who had fallen asleep trying to make a point. His hair was in the kind of disarray that looks like a mistake in a photo. He wore a gray polo shirt and trousers that might have been part of a uniform. His eyes were open wide in a way that was not expressive, pupils wider than I'd expect in the light. His lips moved a fraction, as if catching on a thought. The first impression was simple. A terrified man. The second impression made my body step back without telling me what it had decided. He was the wrong temperature. I heard Farah inhale. The officers had moved 2 steps closer to the line, then remembered the tape and moved back. Lou's hand hovered over the backboard. The man moved a hand, slow at first, like thawing, then faster. Not toward us, toward his own shoelace. He picked at it the way a child picks at a knot, and then, as if something in him unspooled, he stood without using his hands. Alan, I said. He's standing. No response to simple instruction. He looks exhausted. Proceed to verbal again, Alan replied. Bhaskar meter? Safe, Bhaskar said, though his voice didn't sound like the word. I tried again, with more Mandarin and careful English. He took a step forward. A normal step would make a normal sound. His step sounded like a chair dragged across a floor, a tiny mismatch between the timing of weight and motion. He took another step. His head angled, his eyes found the light and didn't blink. There was a dark smear high on his sleeve where a shoulder might brush a rough surface. I felt my thumb find the cap of the small spray horn clipped to my vest, the kind we used to get attention on a noisy dock. "Hold," Alan said. That was when Victor moved. It was graceful in the way only big men make small moves. He reached to the door edge, drew it closed 6 centimeters, a private compromise between caution and compassion. "Sir," Victor said, in Mandarin of his own, with a Ukrainian melody, "Wo men bang ni, we help." The man closed the distance between the rear panel and the pallet stack in 3 movements that had too much momentum at the end of each. He didn't stumble, he simply had to negotiate with his own speed. He reached the pallet, put his hand on the cardboard corner, and the skin around his knuckles blanched and then didn't pink back. He put a second hand on the pallet. His fingers left faint traces on the dust. He stepped again toward the light, and the half-moons on the inside of the other door suddenly didn't look historic. "Back," Alan said. "Close, now, full close." We started to close. The hinge caught the habit of being open and resisted. The man came forward. His face did not have anger in it, or fear, or pleading. It had a single instruction that I could not translate. "Close," Alan said, voice clipped. We pulled the door to within a palm's width, and then something from inside met it. Not a slam, no drama, just a pressure whose direction was not ambiguous. The door kissed the jamb and then bounced a centimeter open, a slow breath, and then a pressure again. It was the patience that chilled me. Farah stepped forward and placed the board flat. Liu's squint stopped pretending to be a smile. Officer Zhang held up his hand as if he could push force at a distance. The third pressure had more decision in it. The door tried to open more than we wanted it to, and the sling line went taut, and the capstan braked, and the whole setup became a short lesson in vectors. Victor leaned into the steel and made a sound that was his weight arriving. I added my shoulder. Inside, the man made the same patient pressure. Everyone became very practical very quickly. Alan's voice slowed, which is what it does when something is moving faster than it should. "We are closing. We are closing. Victor, Teo, ready for retreat on 3. Farah, stand back. Officers, remain at the line." We closed it. No triumph. Just the soft clack of steel meeting itself, and the even softer sigh of a man who should not have been in a container in the first place being on the other side of it. Victor slipped the locking cam into place, and I set a temporary latch while Jiro whipped a strap across the handles. We were not securing it for shipment. You don't strap a story shut. We were buying time to think. "Everyone breathe," Alan said. Then to the officers. "We need quarantine support now, medical, containment." Officer Wang spoke into his radio with many numbers. Officer Zhang looked smaller than he had 10 minutes earlier. "We will call the special unit," he said. "Please wait." "Wait," Liu repeated, like a bad translation of a joke. We didn't wait so much as divide tasks. Farah checked Victor's shoulder, where the door's bounce had left a red line through his vest. Jiro double-checked the strap. Bhaskar replayed the body cam feed on his tablet, and we watched ourselves watching a man. It looked clinical on the small screen. It did not feel clinical in my chest. Through the shut doors came a sound I could not forget later. Not a shout, not a call for help, not the animal noise of panic. It was a steady pattern like someone practicing consonants. The syllables had no words yet, just the rhythm of speech. Then came a sound like a palm sliding down corrugate steel. "Alan," I said. I want to back the spreader off the door and bring the forklift here as a brace." "Do it," he said. Yasha's forklift was 2 bays over. He drove it with the gentle, arrogant confidence of a man who has reversed heavy things more times than he has shaken hands. He set the forks against the door with a whisper, left the engine idling, hands on the controls. He said nothing. His usual jokes were out of season. We waited in that practical way people wait when they have a checklist. Farah set up a small zone with cones for a decontamination that would be symbolic but helpful for our minds. Buskar checked the meter again and gave it the disbelieving look instruments endure when the world refuses to be quantifiable. Lou called his boss, and his boss called someone else, and the language became a series of acknowledgments that meant, "The answer is on its way, but not here." It took 10 minutes for the port sirens to change pitch and for the red lights to chase each other down the spine of the roof. It took 12 for the first squad in dark uniforms to arrive at the far end of the bay, and 20 for their supervisor to reach us. And in those 8 minutes between, something happened in the yard beyond the shuttered gate that none of us could see but all of us could feel. The air changed. Trucks that had been idling were turned off. The yard cranes parked their trolleys mid-span. The yard's internal radio chatter thinned out to only the voice who says, "All units stand by." The squad who arrived wore full-face respirators and suits that make everyone look like the same height. Their supervisor, a woman with the eyes of someone who permanently monitors 3 channels, introduced herself as Captain Lee. She asked for a summary. Alan gave it with the spare language of his type. Unit identification, time of first open, presence of 1 adult male, observable behavior, our actions, current status. She nodded after each noun. "And contact?" she asked, finally, meaning, did anyone touch anyone? "No," I said, then realized my thumb had brushed the corner of the door where his hand had been. Only steel to steel. Captain Lee's chin dipped a fraction. "We will secure the door and take over." Officer Zhang exhaled like a man concluding the summary of a document he didn't write. He turned to leave to call in whatever report completes that shape of day. Then the bay doors, those big roof-hung roller shutters at the far end, whined and came down like the curtain at the end of a play. I watched the yard beyond turn from a page of industry to a photograph of itself. The gates sealed. The forklift drivers looked at each other and then parked without instruction. The squad moved to the container door with a practiced choreography. The first pair set a brace above the locking cams. The second pair unrolled a fabric barrier like a second door in front of the first. Captain Lee's radio hissed something that made her stand taller and grow quieter. "What's happening outside?" Lou asked. "We have a precaution at the terminal perimeter," she said without looking at him. "There will be a temporary hold on all gate movements." "Temporary," Yasha said, in the tone fishermen use to describe weather. Alan glanced at me. "Teo, inventory the emergency gear. Assume we're the last to get out if anyone gets out." "Why last?" Jiro asked. "Because we opened the door," Alan said, and then softer, "and because we know how to keep people breathing." We inventoried what we had. 2 days of bottled water meant for hot work. A locker of mechanics' snacks, biscuits, instant noodles, canned congee, a box of tea bags, instant coffee, filters for respirators, but only half a box, gloves by the 100, a small generator with a half tank, spotlights, 4 full oxygen bottles for med use. The diving gear itself is not a breathing solution on land. You don't route an umbilical through a city, but the discipline of it is stay calm, stay tethered, stay clear-headed. I caught Farah looking at the decon cones she had set up like chess pieces around a king no one could see. "What do you need?" I asked. "Clear lines of movement," she said. "People listen better when you point to tape." We taped lanes across the floor to the supply shelves and to the wash station. We posted a hand-lettered sign, English and Chinese, about washing hands with soap for a full 20 seconds, and we all obeyed our own sign like the law it was. The squad worked the door. They had a system. 2 at the door, 1 at the meter, 1 with the camera tube, 2 more holding a soft barrier. They opened not 12, not 20 centimeters, but 5. They inserted the camera tube. The small screen showed corrugated walls, pallet corners, the black outline of shoes. The shoes moved, the screen bled static. The shoes moved closer. The tube jiggled. The person carrying the tube held it with both hands and did not shake. Captain Lee stepped closer in a way that made everyone else step back. "Sir," she tried through her mask, "we want to help you. Please lie down with your hands visible." Her Mandarin fell into a rhythm I've heard medics use all over the world, the same song in every language. "We are here. We are not here to harm you. We need you to be still. We need you to breathe slowly." The screen showed the outline of a face, and then the screen showed blur. The person inside met the soft barrier with their shoulders so gently that it would have been nothing if everyone's hearts had not been registering beats like container codes. The barrier held. A hand appeared under it and pressed up. The glove on that hand looked like damp paper. The person inside made the sound again, the one without words, and for a moment, listening, I thought I heard syllables. Not help, not please, not where. Just a rhythm that could have been counting or could have been a motor that forgot its job. "Close," Captain Lee said, and they did. An inch, 2, the door kissing the jamb again. The forklift pressing the steel with a tenderness that looked like iron learning to hold its breath. "You will be safe if you stay calm," Captain Lee said at the door, to the person inside, to us, to herself. She nodded at Alan. "We will remove the unit to a secure area. You and your crew will remain inside this bay until the perimeter hold is lifted." "What is the perimeter hold for?" Lou asked, voice flattened to office quiet. Captain Lee finally looked at him. "There is a report of another unit in Yard F with a similar situation," she said. "And a third in B2, and one at the truck gate. We do not want people moving between areas right now." "How long is right now?" Yasha asked. "Until I say otherwise," she said. No anger, just a fact, said quietly. They moved the unit with the forklift as a brace and 2 more forklifts guiding the weight from the hinges. The door did not open further. The door did not need to open further to make the sound that will live in my bones. That patient pressure, the steady insistence, as if instruction lived in muscle memory that refused to consult the rest of the person. The squad was professional. They used a mobile barrier that looked like a fabric hallway to escort the unit out of the bay. They were careful in a way I could not help but trust. I trust people who tape their own sleeves. When the container left, the bay felt bigger and smaller at the same time. We were 6 civilians and 2 port officers who did not want to be the last ones on any list. Captain Lee left 2 squad members to sit by the door with their radios on their knees. "If you need anything," she said, "ask. Do not try to leave the bay. Do not approach the shutters if you hear noise from outside. We will update you." We nodded because nodding was what we had. The first hour after a lockdown is a question asked in 100 languages. What now? We did what port people do. We organized. We put labels on shelves that didn't need labels. We counted batteries. We made tea we didn't want and drank it anyway because rituals keep a person from checking the same 2 apps every 5 minutes. Lou wrote things on a clipboard because clipboards make you feel like someone will ask for the paper later. Jiro tuned the radio to the yard freak, and then turned it down because listening made him stand too straight. Yasha leaned on the forklift and told a story about a winter in Vladivostok when the sea froze and the container ships were quiet as planets. And then the bay filled with a second silence, not like the first. This one came from the absence of sound that should have been there. The distant thump of straddle carriers, the beep-beep of reversing stackers, the horns at the gate when a driver gets impatient. It was as if the port had turned into a photograph of itself again, and this time the photograph had lost saturation. I walked to the wash station and scrubbed my hands under water so hot my skin went pink. I looked at my face in the mirror, the salt marks from the morning's wind still faint on my cheek. I practiced keeping my voice level. I am a diver, not a rescuer. But every diver knows the sound of patience on the wrong side of a door, and every diver has trained for what happens when a small problem takes a breath and becomes a big one. "Teo," Farah said, joining me at the sink, "you're thinking too loud." "I'm thinking at the volume of a safety briefing," I said. She allowed a smile. "Do we have enough masks?" she asked. "Enough for a day," I said. "If we reuse carefully more." "We may be here more than a day," she said, not as forecast, but as a way of aligning her own mind to how she would ration calm. We were not alone for long. The first knock came from the bay's side door, the one usually propped open for airflow. It was a polite knock, not the knock of panic or order. I opened it a hand's width, and a dock worker stood there in his orange vest with his helmet askew and his eyes carrying a look I recognized from typhoons, the knowledge that plans are about to be tested. "Xiangdi, brother," he said in Mandarin, softened by Suzhou vowels. "Can we shelter here for a while? Gate closed. Radio says to stay where we are, but we are—" He looked back at the bay where trucks were ghosts. "We are in the open." Alan nodded. "How many?" 14, he said, from Reefer C. We were on break. "Come," Alan said. And he said it in Mandarin that carried respect. "We have water and a toilet. We will mark an area for your team." We taped another square on the floor. The men and 2 women who joined looked like every port crew in the world. Electricians with rolls of tape like bracelets. A mechanic with grease under his nails that never disappears. A foreman with a radio worn until the antenna's rubber peeled. They thanked too much at first, and then not enough later because the thanking turned into helping. Stacking, counting, taping, wiping. Liu negotiated a language that was mostly hands in friendship. Yasha found an old speaker and played a song I didn't know, and then turned it off because it felt like the wrong sort of noise. Farah made people wash their hands and drink water. Bhaskar found every sign with a graphic of a hand and retaped it higher. Jiro made a pot of instant noodles on a hot plate and fed whoever was nearest. On the hour, Captain Lee came to the door and reported facts like she was handing out carefully measured medicine. "We have 4 units with persons inside. 2 have been transferred to a secure area. 1 is pending, the perimeter hold remains in place. There has been 1 incident at the truck gate with a person leaving a cab who did not respond to verbal instructions. They are safe now." Safe? I wanted to ask, which meaning of safe, but I understood the kindness of the word. "Is this a disease?" one of the reefer electricians asked her, the kind of question that is too large and too honest for the moment. "We are treating it as a safety incident," she said, "not as evasive as that sounds. We will have information to share soon." "Soon," Yasha said again, not unkindly. Afternoon stretched into a second kind of time. The one ports use in typhoons and airports use in ash clouds. We built a schedule because schedules are ropes. 1 person on the door to receive updates. 1 on the radio, volume low, pen ready. 1 managing the water and instant noodles. Farah rotated through everyone with questions about dizziness, cough, heat. "Not because I think you have anything," she said, "but because I want you to listen to your own body." We heard noises from beyond the shutter once, the particular hollow slap of boot on concrete at a run, and then the crisp order voice of someone with authority. Then quiet again. When I closed my eyes, I could still hear the not-quite words the man in the container had made, and I refused to let my mind put any other person's face to that sound. In the lull that felt like early evening, though the sky you could not see might have been midday, Alan came to stand next to me by the maintenance bench where I was pretending to inventory bolts. "You all right?" he asked. "Define all right," I said, stealing his style. "Breathing," he said. "Not making choices for the future while living in the present." "I'm breathing," I said, "and I think I am making choices only for the next hour." "That is the correct radius," he said. "What is your radius?" I asked. 2 hours, he said, and then admitted, "and a map of this bay, if we had to sleep." We became the kind of people who make maps. We put duct tape on the floor and marked out zones. Rest, supplies, a space where anyone who developed a cough or fever could sit and look at Farah without being crowded. We're not doctors. We are port people. Port people are the world's amateurs at emergency management. We make lines on floors and we obey them. We don't need uniforms to be a uniform. It was near sunset by the logic of shift workers' stomachs when the second knock came at the side door. This one was faster, more like the knock of someone trying to keep a hold on their own voice. I opened the door the same careful hand's width. A man I hadn't seen before stood there, wearing a security vest faded to a color that used to be bright. He had a cut on his hairline where a helmet brim meets a door frame when things move too fast. He was breathing like someone who had run from the end of a dock to the other end of a dock, steady but not in control of the rhythm yet. "Help," he said in Mandarin that was half shout, half borrowed politeness. "My colleague is in the next bay. He searched for a word that wouldn't tug the wrong string. "He is not well. He won't stop walking. He won't speak. He is walking into the racks." Captain Lee must have heard the cadence of his voice because her squad member at our door was already standing. She called in something too fast for me to track. Farah gently moved past me and put her palm up like a crossing guard to our group. "We stay," she said. "We let the professionals handle it." I held the door and watched the professionals become the shape they are paid to be. They moved with the economy of practice. The man with the cut on his head led them into the next bay, which was a mirror of ours. Steel, concrete, yellow tape, but also a different country because of what was happening inside it. We heard at first only the castanet click of boots at a march, then a sound like a hand on metal, and then the captain's voice, calm, repeated, instructional. I learned then what I have always known in water. Calling is a skill, and some people can make even fear decide to listen. We did not watch. We respected their work by not making it a show. Jiro turned to face our own bay and checked the generator again even though he checked it 5 times. Lou wrote something on his clipboard that did not need to be written. Yasha took a deep breath that could have been a prayer or simply a way of refreshing his lungs. The squad came back 10 minutes later with a man between them who walked like he was on a treadmill someone else had set. He was younger than me. His face was an expression I recognized from the sea, intent without context, alertness waiting for a task. He didn't look left or right as they guided him through the corridor of the soft barrier they'd rolled out like a new hallway, just straight ahead at a place no one else could see. Captain Lee didn't stop at our door. She nodded from inside her mask. "We will be back soon with an update," she said. "Please remain calm." "You're doing good work," Farah said to her in Mandarin, with the nurse kindness at full strength. Captain Lee's eyes showed the part of her that accepts support without becoming less composed. She left. We slept in shifts that night, if you can call it sleeping. The bay hummed with the sound of powered equipment that wasn't being used, the breath of machines at idle. The emergency lights threw rectangles on steel. We arranged pallets into makeshift benches. Someone found blankets with the port's logo. I woke twice to the sound of the forklift's engine turning over as Yasha, unable to help being who he was, decided to keep it ready. At 3 a.m, by my watch, which I kept checking as if it were guilty, we heard, beyond the shutter, not the run of boots or the crackle of radios, but singing. It took me a moment to realize it was not singing. It was the yard's public address system, set accidentally, perhaps, to a pre-programmed music that sometimes plays during safety week. A tinny melody of encouragement about teamwork. It made me want to laugh and then to put my head in my hands. I dreamed I was underwater in brown water, and instead of fish there were containers going past like slow ships, and inside each was a person sitting with their head tilted, practicing consonants. When I woke, Farah was looking at me like she knew my mind had tried to make art out of something that didn't want art. Morning is different in a closed bay. It arrives through behaviors, not light. People stand up more often. Someone asks about coffee as a test of morale. I made instant coffee in paper cups and handed it out like tickets. The reefer electrician told a story about a time in Ningbo when they had to rewire 30 units by hand overnight when a storm took down a breaker. His hands made maps in the air as he talked. His voice had the grateful tone of someone who remembered a problem that behaved like a problem. Captain Lee returned with more precise words. "We have classified this as an incident involving an unknown condition affecting behavior," she said, careful like a bridge builder measuring spans. Symptoms include unresponsiveness to normal verbal instructions, persistence in movement patterns, and reduced sensitivity to pain. She held up her hand to stop the questions, but the room did not have any. We were too curious to ruin our curiosity with talking. "We are coordinating with medical teams. For now, you remain here. There will be food delivery, there will be medical checks." "Is the port closed?" Liu asked, using a smaller voice than his job title allowed. "Closed to gate traffic," she said. "Internal movements are controlled. Vessels at berth are held. Tug crews remain on standby." "What about the units?" I asked, meaning the persons in units, meaning the people who had become the wrong category. "Where do they go?" "We are establishing a secure area at the far end of Yard H," she said. "Medical and containment." "Containment," Jiro repeated, like a man tasting a word in a new language. I felt the same thing I feel when the sea goes from green to gray. Not fear, exactly, but the understanding that the scale of the thing is larger than your boat. I tightened the strap on my hard hat and checked the time on my watch and tried to live in a radius no larger than the next hour. In emergencies, someone always proposes a new job that wasn't in the plan. It came from the reefer electrician who had become our talker. "We have people in the restrooms in Bay C," he said, eyes on his foreman. "They don't want to walk through the open yard to the medical area. Can we escort them bay to bay? Use doors only? We can tape routes." Alan looked at Captain Lee, and for a moment we were all pieces in a board game where the rules were being written. Captain Lee considered, calculated, and then said, "If we coordinate, yes. Use radios, use tape, no one runs." And so we did what ports do better than almost anyone. We made a corridor out of nothing. Tape on floors, doors propped, cones forming a new path. Alan took point with a radio. I took rear guard because rear guard is where divers often stand. They know how to check the line stays untangled. We moved people. 6 men and 1 woman, bay to bay, past silent cranes and forklifts that looked like animals waiting at the edge of a forest. We listened for anything that would change our speed. We heard only our own breath and, faint and far, a voice on PA saying something about safety as a value. At Bay D, we met a crew from maintenance sitting on upturned buckets, listening to a small radio with poor reception. The words came through like someone trying to speak under a towel. Temporary measure. Coordination with health authorities. Please remain calm. We nodded, as if nodding could tune a radio. When we returned to our bay, there was a new note taped to the inside of the shutter at the eye level. In English and Chinese, it said, "Do not approach the door without radio permission." Someone had drawn a smiley face next to it, which made it easier to obey. The day wore itself down like a rope used for an anchor. We became good at small tasks. We rationed batteries. We made lists we crossed out. We learned the names of the reefer crew, and they learned ours. We told stories with sentences tuned to keep anxiety below a red line. We laughed at nothing sometimes and then didn't, because humor is a tide too. Late afternoon, Captain Lee returned again, and this time her eyes were the kind that deliver news you cannot change. "We have an expanded perimeter," she said. "We will keep you here overnight again." "And tomorrow?" Lou asked, even though he knew better than to ask a day for its plan. "Tomorrow, we will tell you about tomorrow," she said, which is an answer I have learned to accept from typhoons, captains, and doctors. That night, we heard from far beyond our shutter, something like a chorus but not singing. Not panic, not joy, a pattern of voices practicing consonants. It rose and fell like a breaker. It passed like one too. We didn't go to the shutter. We didn't need to. We put another strip of tape around the door and wrote on it, not "Do not open," but "Please keep closed," because the brain likes being asked nicely. We slept in pairs, one awake, one not. I dreamed again, and in the dream I was back in water, umbilical tight against my thigh, counting hand over hand along a line toward a shape that I could not name. When I woke, Farah was sitting on a pallet with her chin in her hands, looking at the ceiling as if it would offer a diagram. She glanced at me. "We're doing okay," she said. "That is not the same as good, but it is okay." Morning again. The second morning inside a bay feels different from the first in the way the second watch underwater feels. Your body has learned the rules and hates them a little less. We had exactly enough instant noodles to make eating one feel like a victory. The officers who had redefined observe helped move pallets like civilians. I saw in their faces the same thing I see in every uniform when the plan is still forming, the willingness to be told what to do when the telling is clear. We got our first outside message via the yard radio, a voice from the terminal office asking for inventory counts from various bays. Lou did the list like a surgeon: water, fuel, people, skills. He read the word skills as if it were heavier than the others, and maybe it was, because skills are what we trade when equipment runs out. Midday, a call came for us. "Salvage team, this is Captain Lee. Your assistance is requested at Bay G. You will be given protective equipment. You will escort a small group past a section the squad is holding. The group includes 2 drivers and 1 interpreter. Repeat, we need your help." Alan looked at us and did a roll call of eyes. No one said no. Saying yes is the salvage of a crew. We suited in masks and gloves and face shields. We took radios. Farah gave us a look that was the same as always. "Come back with the same number you left with." Bay G was 6 bays away by the counted method, through doors, along tapes, past signs. The squad had set a soft barrier across the open expanse between 2 sets of racks. Beyond it, I could see a figure walking. Not fast, not slow, not random. The figure turned in a loop at exactly the same point every time, like a machine constrained by its own geometry. The squad gave the figure a corridor as if it were an endangered animal that might relax if you respected its line. We moved with their permission along the edge of the wall, past, quiet, deliberate. The interpreter, a woman in a finance department jacket and sneakers, nodded to us. "Thank you," she said in English. "The drivers are returning to Bay B." "Stay inside the tape," Alan said, and she smiled because she had already learned to obey tape faster than orders. On the way back, behind us, the figure made the sound again, a rhythm of syllables that did not want meaning yet. The interpreter flinched and then squared her shoulders and did something I admired. She did not turn to look. She kept moving forward, listening to her own feet. Back in our bay, the reefer electrician told us a new rumor, that the vessel at berth 15 had 13 units flagged and that the crew were being kept aboard. I've been a port rumor translator since I was 19. That one tasted believable, and also like it might be the wrong number. I put it in the part of my brain labeled, "Do not repeat except to yourself." Captain Lee arrived in late afternoon with a new expression, still composed, but now with a layer of something like gratitude. "We will begin moving you sector by sector to a staging area where health checks will be made and decisions will be made about who can go home and who must remain. Your sector is scheduled for tomorrow morning." Morning. Yasha said more kindly this time because the promise was observable. "What about our work?" Lou asked, because he was built to ask it. "Yard E1, the stack collapse, the submerged unit?" "Stays submerged," I said before she could answer, and then apologized with my eyes. He nodded. He wasn't offended. He was calculating loss. Ports are machines that hate to be turned off because turning them back on is a ballet that masquerades as arithmetic. We did one more inventory. We counted masks like coins. We gave our bay a sweep. We taped over the tape. We sat and listened to Yasha tell a story about a crane in Vladivostok that once picked up a container of oranges that had not seen light in 2 months, and how the smell when they opened it made the whole quay think of summer. I will not write down the things we heard that night. They were not dangerous in themselves. They were unhelpful to sleep. They were the kinds of sounds that a person could turn into stories that would not serve anyone at breakfast. We slept anyway, the way professionals sleep, by choosing it. Morning, and Captain Lee at the door, and the rare visible relief of someone whose plan has not fallen apart overnight. "Staging in Yard H," she said. "We will go bay by bay." "Will we see the sky?" Jiro asked, only half joking. "Yes," she said, and I saw in her the human urge to give something good. "Yes, you will see the sky." We walked the tape corridors like pilgrims, past forklifts parked like statues, past cranes at rest like tall animals in a field, past signs that suddenly looked profound because we had been without movement. The staging area was a rectangle of yard pinned by barriers and marked with lanes. There was a tent with medical staff. There were chairs with respectful space between them. There were boxes of bottled water and a table with forms. We stood in line like you do at airports or clinics, patient, foot to foot, part of something bigger in ways we couldn't name. A doctor looked in my eyes and asked me to follow his finger. He asked me to touch my nose. He asked me if I had a headache. He asked me if I felt like my legs wanted to walk without my permission. I answered, and the answers mattered and also didn't. We were being touched by the system to make sure we were still ourselves. We were allowed to leave the staging area in groups, with instructions to go to assigned dormitories in the port complex, or, if we lived in staff housing, to go there and not elsewhere. Phones were handed back to those who had surrendered them. Farah wiped each with disinfectant as if the gesture could protect whatever news they would show. People cried, small and precise, like release valves. Before we left, I stood on a concrete block and looked toward berth 15. The cranes were still. On the horizon, past the Donghai Bridge, beyond the curve of the breakwater, a vessel sat, a stack of rectangles against the water. It looked exactly like what it was, a thing full of things, waiting. Alan came to stand next to me, hands in his pockets. "We will go back to work when they tell us to," he said. "We will," I said. "And we will say yes, because that is what we do." "What do you think this is?" he asked, not as a test, but as an invitation to make our minds less crowded. "I think it is something that makes people forget how to listen and makes their bodies remember something else," I said. "I think it travels in ways we don't understand, yet I think it doesn't care about our schedules or our rituals. I think we will figure out how to live with it because that is what we do." He nodded. "And we will put more tape on the floor," he said. And for the first time in 2 days, I laughed in a way that did not ask permission. We walked with our crew to the dormitory assigned to us. The sky was a color I hadn't bothered to name in too long. The port buzzed at the edge of its own silence, ready to become itself again, but knowing it might be a different self. I thought of the man in the container, and then I tried not to, and then I did again, because that is what humans do. We hold two ideas, compassion and caution, in the same hand and try not to drop either. That evening, in a room with white walls and bunk beds that reminded me of training, I called my mother in Batangas. She asked me if I'd eaten. I told her I had. She asked me if I was sleeping. I told her I would. She asked me if I had been in the water. I told her not yet. She told me that when you are between things, you must remember to be someone's son, because being someone's son is a job too. Then I lay on the bunk and listened to the dormitory noises, the laughs, the text tones, the little coughs, and I thought about the world's boxes. We spend so much time making sure things move, numbers lining up, codes matching codes. Every box has paperwork. Every door has a seal. We believe in the story that all movement is knowable, but there are always stowaways in the language of a place. There are always currents under the tide. I am a cargo diver. My world is ropes and steel and water that likes to forget. I know how to find what falls. I know how to breathe when the surface is complicated. I know the difference between a door that opens and one that should not. I also know now that the loudest thing in a port is not the horns, not the cranes, not the trucks. It is the silence that arrives when the math of global trade meets a human instruction that has no data field. It is the stillness when a person on the wrong side of a door teaches you a new definition of patience. We went back to work 3 days later, on a schedule that felt like walking on the deck of a ship that had shifted ballast. Yard E1 got cleared one neat row at a time, with documentation that had footnotes. We rigged the submerged unit that had brought us there in the first place. The water was brown and tired and honest. I descended along the guideline, touching the knot at each meter, talking to Jiro in my ear, listening to my own breath. When I closed on the container underwater, I put my palm on the steel and felt the memory of every story it had carried. The world moves inside these boxes, phones, shoes, tea, hopes, and sometimes things we don't have names for yet. I found the lift point with my glove, signaled up, and felt the tug answer. A dialogue I understood, at least. Above, the cranes waited. The tape on the floor waited. Captain Lee waited with a notebook. The reefer electrician waited with a story about wires. Farah waited with water. Alan waited with a plan for lunch that would taste like relief. The surface called, I answered, I always do, Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.